Okay, so hello, friends, Romans, countrymen. I am here because I recorded this a little while ago, I'm guessing, because I'm intending to upload this and leave it on a delay to put up. Because I'm leaving for a month, so I'm going to put up somewhere in between the month that I'm gone. I don't have enough time to do a lot of the stuff I wanted to do for this, just to see if it's decent. First of all, second of all, see what it pairs up well with, etc. I'll get I'll into that completely a little bit later. But until then, I just want to tell you a little bit about this build that I've been fiddling around with. That's kind of stupid. It's not crazy good. It's not crazy bad. Um, it's just stupid. And I wanted to share it with you guys and what the possibilities might be with it. Now, this is for raiding, I would say. Even though anybody who raids would probably tell you not to play this build. Uh, wait, I'm doing a lot of caveats before starting this. What it basically is a Condi Ellie build that does around 26k DPS, and primarily for half of the time it's doing anything is using Conjure Earth Shield, and which means its rotation is Shield Smack. Well, not Shield Smack. Spam one, you can go through the whole thing there, and then just rotate back and forth between Fire and Earth Attunement. There are better ways to do that as well, but I won't get into that right away. But yeah, so the idea is just make a really, really easy build that is really, really easy to play. Like, really easy to play when you think about it, if you're just spamming one the entire time. Or just pressing one once and letting it do its thing, you know? Um, and that still does a decent amount of DPS if necessary. Oh, I forgot to say, I also wanted to make sure that the build was somewhat self-sufficient so that it could slot in as a DPS role in kind of any group and not like need a Scourge to go along with it, for example, because we all saw that video of a Conjure Earthshield Ellie with a Scourge giving a Barret the whole time, doing a pretty good DPS just for fun. But yeah, so this doesn't need a Scourge. And that is sort of what I got here. There's other options that do sort of similar things, but this is not so bad. This is not so bad for that. So I guess what I'll do is explain the build. So number one, you want to get as much Condi damage as possible. So we've gone Fire, Earth, and Weaver. Fire, you got your burning duration increase and some burning on crit. You got extra Condi damage. We're not going for Pyromancer's Training because you're not in your weapon set all too often, so this is kind of not as useful as it could be. And then I got Persisting Flames because the other options aren't useful in a raid scenario necessarily, unless you got Blinding for whatever reason. So this one, it doesn't do much for your build. You only have a couple of fire fields on double earth, and this one with the Ring of Fire if you're swapping back and forth. So yeah, this is good for burning speed, I suppose. So that's what you're going for. Then earth, you got to increase your duration of your bleeding, a little extra damage when they're bleeding. Strength of Stone for a little more Condi damage. Also, I'm not so sure about this, but the only other option really, besides giving everybody stability, which is useful in a raid scenario, so maybe do that. The only other option besides that is Geomancer's Training, which reduces your Earth skills duration, so it's kind of good for Ring of Earth and not terrible for Churning Earth, but again, you're not going to be using these that often. You'll use this once in a rotation and that's it. So maybe not that important. And then finally, Written in Stone, Signets gain reduced recharge and continue to grant their passive bonuses while recharging. And that's great for Signet of Fire. It's a huge amount of damage from that, and it reduces it down from 15 to 12 seconds. And then in Weaver, you go for the damaging trait. So you need this trait to get your Conji duration up enough to 100%, and it gives you extra Condi damage as well. This you don't necessarily need because, yeah, critical chance increase means more damage, but you're not doing that much power damage, so maybe not. If you like you want to be a little tankier, you could go this guy. And Elements of Rage, same thing with the power damage. You don't have that much power damage, so It's not super duper useful, but it's more damage, so might as well take it. But what? I mean, this is pretty straightforward. So, like, what's the big deal? The big deal is Conjure Earth Shield. If you know anything about it, it's just like a bunch of defensive skills, like 100. All four other skills are defensive skills, and then you got your auto attack, which is a little bit of bleeding, a little bit of damage, and then a little bit more bleeding, a little bit more damage. And then, on the last thing, it's you throw your shield, it goes through your target and then comes back, hits everything along the way. And it only does a little bit of damage, but then if you have barrier, it goes through your... It adds 2 stacks of long bleeding to the damage, and also doubles the physical damage to it. So, and then hits again when it comes back. So each auto attack would be doing 4 stacks of long bleeding and quite a bit of physical damage as well. But you need barrier for that to work. And on the Conjure Earth Shield built in, you have a bunch of barrier skills, but you're not going to be using those because instead you're going to be using Ruin of the Sanctuary. And this is where the build gets stupid. Because this is a vitality boon duration barrier rune and not a condi damage rune, so you're losing a little bit of condi damage from that. But you gain barrier with health equal to 20% of any heals you receive, and that includes anything coming in from your party. But more importantly, it also means anything you do to yourself, like Signet of Restoration. So every time you hit, get a little bit of barrier, and each one lasts for 5 seconds. So you technically always have barrier with Ruin of the Sanctuary, which means you always get your bonus for shield smack. And just auto attacking with this does an insane amount of damage. For not an insane amount of damage comparatively to other damage dealing things, but an insane amount of damage comparatively to the amount of effort you're putting into attacking something. So that is that. I guess I'll do a little rotation real quick, just to show you what you do to maximize your DPS without, when you don't, like when your Conjure Earth Shield drops and stuff like that. Obviously you're going to be using your Signet of Fire off cooldown all the time. The only other thing you have to remember is you need a swap between Earth and Fire attunement, or other attunements if you're not if you're using your Earth Shield. But anyway, you have to swap attunements to a different attunement at least once every 8 seconds to keep that conjure duration and damage up. And then use this Primordial Stance when you're in either Fire or Earth or both, or I mean. The thing you would most like to do is be in double Earth at that time. So like what you could do sometimes is go Earth, and then you have your 8 seconds of this, go Earth again. You still have 4 seconds of this, and then when you swap off Fire, this stays up. So you can go double Earth and keep your Weaver's Prowess going if you want to. And the good news about that also is if you do double Earth, you get your Elements of Rage. So I guess the best attunement rotation would probably be like Earth, Earth, Fire, Earth, Earth, Fire, or Earth, Earth, Fire, Fire, Earth, Earth, Fire, Fire. Anyway, you get the idea. That is it. I'll show you the rotation, and then I'll talk a little bit about where this goes from here with me. So I'm gonna respawn this golem. And the rotation is essentially, I mean, so Weave Self I would use as often as possible as well, and try to keep it up as long as possible, which means that don't use all 4 of your attunements when it's up until the last second of the 20 seconds of Weave Self. You see that right there? And then finally get all 4 attunements, and then you have 10 seconds of perfect weave. So what that means is you'll have 20% extra condition damage for 30 seconds every time you use Weave Self. So yeah, you just sort of like start it up, do a bunch of stuff, and use all your skills, essentially. And drop your Conjurer Shield. And keep rotating between the attunements. I'm just gonna go back and forth. Do, 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 do. But as you can see, your utility skills come off cooldown every once in a while, so you're gonna want to use those. And yeah, look at that, 26, 27k DPS. Not the worst thing in the world. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It's pretty easy. So then, yeah, as you can see, this will come off cooldown. You want to... The most important thing to keep up in this whole scenario is your Weaver's Prowess, so rotating back and forth between Earth and Fire. The double attuning is not as important. And then you got your Earth Shield back again. And you're back to trying to attune and double attune and stuff. Easy peasy. So one last thing, I did try out different weapon sets, not just Dagger Dagger. They all sort of ended up very similar to each other. I think Dagger Dagger had the most damage out of all of them, but like Staff was like 24k. The Dagger Focus was like 25, 26. I did not try Sword. Maybe I should try that at some point. But yeah, maybe it's just because you're mostly in Conjurer Shield, but I guess you could use whatever kind of weapon set you want, whatever you like best, because they're all very similar. So there you go, 26, 27k. That's what you get. That's what you get. Not much more to say about this. Do I recommend it? I don't know yet, because one of the things I wanted to do, unfortunately, so I'm leaving in 2 days on a month-long trip. So that's why I'm uploading this to come out in I don't know, a week, 2 weeks or something like that. And that's why I'm recording this now in a sort of a half-ass way, instead of doing the full homework on this to see if I enjoy using it, number one. Number two, whether people will hate you for it in a raid scenario, like if it really doesn't work properly in a raid. I want to try it out in a raid or two first before I could really sell anybody on this. Number three, and probably the most important one for me, is so when you drop a Conjure Earth Shield, there's no reason for you to drop it while doing anything really until it just runs out of time. That means you have this magnetic shield for somebody else to use, and it's just wasted. And I feel like that's a huge waste, right? So I feel like somebody else should be using this magnetic shield, not me. And who would benefit from that? That's a good question. Just to auto attack and to stack a bunch of bleeds. Who would like having a ridiculous amount of bleeds? And who is a Quasi-Build, I guess, in that case. So there are two classes that have buffs to bleeding, and that is Renegade, which gets 25% extra bleed damage on their bleeds. So that's an option, and I was thinking maybe that's the way to go with it. I think Ranger also has a buff to bleeds, but I'm thinking Renegade is the way to go, because not only does it have that buff to bleeds, so it would maximize its use of that, but it has some really nice utilities to work around as well. So Soul Cleave Summon is another thing to think about, the elite from Renegade, because it gives you and your friends a ton of healing as well, right? Like unnecessary healing. And that means maybe you running Sanctuary Runes, the Renegade running Sanctuary Runes, both of you having the shield and dropping Soul Cleave Summon at the same time as doing a bunch of damage just with your auto attack, and having a huge barrier on top of that is something to think about. A nice little combo there. Maybe a Condi Ellie Renegade with Alacrity, Condi Renegade with Alacrity, and a Quickness Firebrand combo would be a fun thing to think about. But I mean, I haven't been able to test it yet, so I have no idea whether or not. It probably isn't. It probably doesn't even. An Earth Shield, would that replace a Renegade's weapons for damage? I don't think so. Maybe a Renegade's weapons themselves does more damage than they would ever need So getting Conjure Earth Shield would actually reduce the amount of damage you do. The only thing I could think of is maybe it does similar damage, but then with the Conjure Earth Shield, you don't have to use up any energy like you would with your weapons. So you could reserve all that energy for all your utility skills as a renegade. So that's something to think about. And that's it. Yeah, that's all I really wanted to say. Hopefully, I get to work on this a little bit more when I get back from my month-long thing. Maybe I'll work on it while I'm gone somehow. I don't have my computer. I'll just have a laptop, so probably not. But maybe I'll get to do some testing. That's it. I hope this hasn't been too boring. I'll see you guys later. Bye.